So good to be here this morning, church. My home church is Refuge, Huntington Beach, and this is my first time here, and I'm so stoked to be here. We all have a story. We've all come from somewhere, and we're all going somewhere. And I'm going to share a little bit about where the Lord's brought me from, where I'm at now, and where I'm headed. So just to start off, I was born in Northern California, and at the age of 3, my dad died of a massive heart attack, literally at the feet of me, my brother, my sister, and my mom in the parking lot at the hospital. We moved from Northern to Southern California to live with my grandma. When I was 6, my mom remarried. And when she remarried, we realized that my stepdad had a super rage problem. He was a rageaholic for sure. So growing up in my house was not easy. I'm not sure growing up ever really is easy. But regardless, by the time I was in high school, my life started to just spiral out of control. Am I echoing? Crazy. No, it's all good. I'm hearing myself. Lucky you. So anyway, my outlet was athletics. So I was the captain of my basketball team, captain of the soccer team. I was headed for a semi-pro camp in soccer, ran track. But that was like my outlet. I realized that everything I was dealing with at home with my stepdad and my family and life was just out of control. That was where I got all my anger, all my frustration, all my rage out. And then I had a horrible ankle injury. I could no longer participate in athletics. And it was at that point in my life that my life started to spiral out of control. It was like there was a fork in the road and I walked right when I probably should have gone left. And it was at this point in my life that I started hanging out with gangs. I started getting in fights constantly at school. I was drinking a bit already, but I really started drinking heavily, doing drugs. And it was also at this time that I gave into another temptation that I had felt from a very young age. And I started being sexually promiscuous with both men and women. And by the time I promised my mom I would stay at home until I graduated high school, and I did just that. And the very next day after my high school graduation, I moved out. I moved up to Valencia with a friend, and I completely engulfed myself in the gay community. And I always dressed masculine, but it got worse. And I started going to gay clubs, bars. I got a girlfriend. By the time I was 19, I was living in Las Vegas, a full-blown alcoholic in a violently consuming relationship. I had lots of run-ins with the police, and needless to say, I didn't last long in Vegas. I came back to California in hopes that things would get a bit easier, but they didn't. They got worse, surprisingly enough. And I went from one violently consuming same-sex relationship to the next, and I was very promiscuous, and I was never faithful, and I hung out in strip clubs, and I drank every day, and I drove drunk every single time I got in the car. I smoked entirely too much weed, and my life was literally spiraling out of control, and I numbed it. What I numb it with? More alcohol, more drugs, more sex, more of the same thing. And then I started dating a girl that was a stripper, and she was married with 2 kids. And she left her husband and her family for me, and that's not what I wanted. And this was one point in my life I can look back and say, this isn't fun anymore. I'm literally tearing a family apart. And then there was a point in my life where there was like a transition time. And I went out one night, came home the next morning, just like any other morning, getting ready to get in the shower, and instantly something took over my entirety. Physically speaking, my skin got very, very hot. This goes on for about a week, but beyond that, what it was a spiritual, demonic battle for my life, and more than that, for my soul. During this week, I thought I was possessed, and I thought that the enemy had me, and I cried out to God for a week. I say I cried out to God for a week because, see, the whole time I was living this lifestyle, I claimed to be a Christian, right? I'm Christian and I'm gay. I'm Christian and I'm an alcoholic. I'm Christian and I do all these things I want to do. But that's not what walking with the Lord looks like. And I was brought to a place where I was literally like, the enemy has me and the Lord's turned his back on me. I've wandered too far and there's no hope left for me. So for a week, I'm praying to the Lord to take this from me, and he didn't. And then one night, it was May 22nd, 2007, and I remember laying on my friend's couch, and I was crying out to God, literally, to save me. And he revealed something to me in that moment. And he revealed to me what complete and holy and utter surrender looks like. And he brought to my mind that, see, when I was living this lifestyle, I was dealing with bits of conviction along the way. And I would pray to the Lord, if you don't want me to be gay, then take it from me. If you don't want me to live my life this way, then change me. But he didn't. So I reasoned within myself, well, it's okay to continue living this way. But this night he revealed to me that all those times I had prayed for him to take it from me, I never meant it. I never wanted him to take it because I loved the way I was living. I loved drinking. I loved being faded. I loved having sex. I loved being with women. And I'm clinging on to it. And I'm like, Lord, take it. Right? But we don't serve a God that forces us to hand things over. We serve a God that loves us and gives us choice to hand things over to him. And so he didn't take it. But this night when he revealed that to me, I realized that I never meant it. And this night I meant it. And I cried out to God and I surrendered with hands open. And at that moment, I felt the hand of the living God take from me what had been plaguing me for the week prior. During this week, I had seen demons on people's faces. I had felt a demonic presence sitting next to me in the car. This was a real spiritual battle for my life, literally. And the Lord stripped it from me. And two things struck me. The first was, if hell is anything like what I just experienced, I don't want anything to do with it. And the second was, my life's never going to be the same. And it hasn't been. I bought a Bible. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew the Lord had a different plan for me. So I opened the Bible, started reading through the Psalms, couldn't put it down. I ended up moving away from my life. I moved away from my friends. I moved away from everything that I knew and started getting involved in ministry and things like that. And next thing I know, I'm dating a guy, and come to find out, this guy is a sex offender. And this guy has 2 strikes for lewd acts with minors under the ages of 14. And I'm like, if this is what dating guys looks like, I don't want anything to do with it. So it sort of spun me a little bit back into my old life, but at the same time, I was convicted living that way. So for a while, I'm like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Didn't know what it looked like to serve God, but I knew that that was the life I was called to. Anyway, I was living in Long Beach at the time. I moved down to Orange County, and I started getting more involved in ministry, and doors were opening up. I got plugged in at the church. But the whole time I felt completely isolated because no one in my old life could understand where I was at now. And I felt like no one in the church could relate to me. I felt like no one knew I came from a gang-banging, drug-addicted, alcoholism, same-sex attraction. I look at the church and I'm like, these people can never understand the life that I've lived. But you know what? Jesus understands. And God understands, right? And we serve this powerful God. But what did I do? I'm wrapped in flesh and I'm super weak and I backslid. And when I backslid, it went from 1 drink to 3 months of binge drinking. Without going into too much detail about what happened during that 3 months, I'll tell you how it ended. I got a DUI. A girl I was dating at the time ended up going missing. And I was questioned by LA Homicide as a possible suspect for her disappearance. At the same time, her dad, who was a very well-known LA gang member, put a hit out on my life, and I had to move. In the end, her remains were found, and she was murdered, and I was obviously removed as a suspect. But my point in telling you this story is that my life literally crumbled around me. And this was after a point where I knew God. I had felt the hand of the living God in my life. I was serving Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and I turned my back on him. And in the midst of that, God doesn't just let us sit there, right? God doesn't just say, live in your sin. You know me, but live in your sin. He has other plans. And when my life crumbled around me, I stood there in the wreckage of my life, and again, I called out to the living God. And again, he extended his hand from his holy temple in heaven. And again, his grace covered me. And again, I was forgiven. And again, my life was dramatically changed. I graduated from Vanguard University, and I'm going to tell you where I'm at now, and this is not to somehow blow my own head up, because I'm wicked at heart. And when I live my life for me, I've seen what happens. So what I'm telling you right now, where I'm at today, is to praise the God of heaven. Because if God can change me, just like God changed Saul, God can change me. He can change any one of us. And this is not just for non-believers. This is for believers because we're called into a life of excellence. And we are not called to sit stagnant. We're called into active living for God. And we're called to spread his word. And we're called to share the gospel. And we're called to share our stories because this is the reality that we live in. This is the world that we live in. But God saves. And God meets us right where we're at. He doesn't say, come to me, changed. He says, come to me and I'm going to change you and I'm going to change the desires of your heart and I'm going to make you new. So where I'm at today is I graduated from Vanguard University. I started attending a theological seminary. The Lord has opened insane doors for ministry and I'm super humbled by it. I'm blessed by it. I'm overwhelmed by it. But the reality is this is the life we're called to, right? We're called to serve God. We're called to share his love. And I'm getting ready to go out with a team to Sydney, Australia to plant a church in the heart of the city. And I'm super stoked about it. But my whole point in coming and sharing with you guys today is to say that God's grace covers all sin. God's grace covers the murderer. God's grace covers the murderer. God's grace covers the one that's in the homosexual lifestyle. God's grace covers the alcoholic. God's grace covers the sex addict, the porn addict, the drug addicted. And he says, come to me and I will cleanse you. Come to me and I will make you new. Come to me and I will give you a new life in me. And I'm standing here before you today unashamed of my past because of the blood of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And that's it. I thank you guys for letting me share it, and I'm so stoked to be here this morning.